Today we want to discuss how to mobilize and work with domestic and international military forces in the context of humanitarian action. I will offer 5 tips. These 5 tips come from my experience in working as a civil-military coordination officer with humanitarian agencies. I'm sure you have many more of these tips and tricks how to best utilize military assets, and we are most grateful if you could share these tips with our section, the Civil Military Coordination section at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Make good friends with the United Nations agencies, with the humanitarian United Nations agencies, in particular UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and World Food Programme. I experienced that within these 2 agencies you always find somebody either related to security or to logistics who has great relationships or who has developed great relationships. The example I wanted to refer to in this context is Sudan, major operation for both agencies, UNHCR and World Food Programme. And the first thing I did was always to call up the security officer of UNHCR, who had, I think, the best overview of the situation and of the actors, international and military actors on the ground. It is challenging, in particular when we deploy on these short-term missions. I have been only a couple of weeks in Sudan, and I didn't have the time myself to develop these relationships, so I had to rely on the United Nations humanitarian agencies and to take advantage of these agencies. So in this context, it was the UNHCR security officer. Tip number 2, develop your plans and action together with the international military forces. In the tsunami in Indonesia, it was almost impossible to do anything without the Australian military forces. I'm saying international military forces because they have most likely bilateral agreements with a number of countries surrounding the country where the action and where the humanitarian work takes place. These international forces are so important to us, and through a good relationship and developing the plan together with international forces, in particular with the civil military cooperation officers, most military forces have now a structure where we can clearly see the entry point for humanitarian civil military coordination. And most of the time it's the civic centers or civil military cooperation centers. So in the tsunami, in the response in Banda Aceh, the Australian military forces were key to our work. We set up the center, the coordination center. Together with these forces, we mobilized many aircraft and other assets together in support of humanitarian action. Tip 3. Assess the diplomatic community. And when I say assess, I don't mean check on them, what they are doing. I mean try to get on as many invitation lists as you can get. Within these communities, most of the time you will find a military attaché, military advisor to the representative of this particular country, and within this community there are a number of military establishments providing assets in support of the humanitarian community. In Ghana, floods I had the pleasure to be an UNDAC team leader. We relied heavily on the French military advisor within the mission. He was able to give us the details on the military assets from France available, helicopters from the neighboring countries, namely from the peacekeeping mission in Côte d'Ivoire, who were then called in support of aerial assessments. So we could mobilize them together with the government to get this French military assets into Ghana to assess the extent of the floods these days. It was mainly thanks to the diplomatic community and their willingness to cooperate, not only with money and give us money, but also the assets what we need. So tip number 3, assess the diplomatic community, and remember, assessing in the sense of trying to get into their invitation list when they have social gatherings, and during these social events there is quite a lot United Nations Humanitarian Civil Military Coordination Officer can achieve. Tip number 4, my favorite: make use of non-formal networks, in particular friendship network, nationality network, and any other social network. I'm coming from a small country, and in this particular scenario, the Austrian water purification unit was on the ground, and we could ask them for transport. For sure we have our own cars, but sometimes in such a remote area as it was in Pakistan, we were quite happy to have access to some specialized off-road vehicles, and this was just thanks to the network of people from the same nationality what we could utilize. So the water purification unit shared with us some transport. And finally, tip number 5. Stay in touch and call the Civil Military Coordination section in Geneva at OCHA. In Pakistan, during the earthquake, our operational coordinator asked me once to get helicopters, to get a helicopter quickly, and not necessarily a domestic helicopter from the Pakistani Air Force. He wanted to maintain somehow his real or perceived independence, so he asked for a helicopter which is maybe not in a camouflaged color. And in this situation I called immediately the headquarters. We did not see these assets on the ground, we did not see the assets which are not related somehow to the parties, either in parties to the conflict, either in the country or in the neighboring country, in Afghanistan. So we called our section, and our section was able, through Switzerland, to mobilize a helicopter. Now you can imagine that this helicopter cannot fly from Switzerland into Pakistan within no time. So Switzerland again used their networks to mobilize a helicopter from Uzbekistan. So within 24 hours we got a helicopter from the neighboring country. That's one example how the Civil Military Coordination section can help. But the more day-to-day examples are really in support, in advising, in mapping the military environment, the police environment. So these are the day-to-day work what we can do, assisting in the development of guidelines, having some tips for the country offices, how it was done in another country. We also try to engage with bringing a network closer together with annual retreats, web exercises. So there is quite a lot what we offer and what we plan to offer to our United Nations Humanitarian Civil Military coordinators or humanitarian affairs officers who have the civil-military coordination portfolio within their job description.